So I just read Fire Punch, and I would say the themes are misunderstanding and myth, as well as a little bit of a like murder morality combined with revenge and the effects that that has going forward for individuals who use that to fuel their motivation to continue living. I mean, that's like the biggest theme. But the substantive material is a little wacky, and I have some problems with it where it seems to like brush up against me. So, one of the main parts of the story that like just floors me is being fucking stupid. And Chainsaw Man had this same fucking problem. And a lot of Japanese media seems to have this problem where a character is shamed for doing something in self-defense. In Chainsaw Man, Denji is shamed for killing his father in self-defense when his father is abusing him. In Higurashi, the characters aren't really shamed for killing the people in their lives who would end up trying to kill them, but the story world punishes them for essentially using violence as the solution for their problems every time. The only perfect world is one where nobody dies. Obviously, it's a perfect world, right? But anyway, and in Fire Punch Man is blamed for killing lots of people, but he only ever intentionally killed people who are literally unrepentant rapists and murderers. And everyone else doesn't make any sense. So part about the myth thing is that there's a lot of like religious mythologizing in the story to give characters a reason to live, because the world is a frozen hellscape and they have to like, eat ground up canned potatoes or whatever the fuck to live. And one of the myths after the first time skip is that Fire Punch Man burned down Bayamorg City, and some people view this as a good thing and some people view this as a bad thing, but they all blame him for killing all the citizens. But the problem is that that wasn't his fault. And if anything, it was Togata's fault, the director. I mean, nobody can know that though, because Togata, and when the point that it happened, nobody knew all the pieces that were in place that made that event happen. But essentially, Togata works with the bad people at that time to free some of their worst criminals who are just unrepentant, unremorseful assholes who literally, their motivation is killing and raping. And Togata has like this power suit that she gives to one of them, but that's also a spoiler, so whatever. Who cares? We're gonna be talking about a lot of spoilers. But Togata organizes this situation where the battle happens, but Fire Punch is blamed for everyone dying because Fire Punch is such a standout character that is easy to center a myth around. So despite Fire Punch just getting kicked into the buildings, and everyone's like, hey, don't punch him into those buildings, don't fight over by those buildings, hey, stay away from those buildings, the whole place will go up like a powder keg, everyone's gonna die. Like, despite that being a thing that both sides know about, the person that they have in the power suit kicks Fire Punch into the buildings, and he burns all the buildings down because that's how his flames work, and he's blamed for it. But we have to go back. Why does Fire Punch even have fucking fire on his body in the first place? Because Doma burned him. And that's another thing too, is that like the story and the characters incorrectly blame Agni for his actions. Doma, when they finally meet back up, Doma says that this village of cannibals needed to be burned because if Agni died, then he wouldn't be able to feed them, and then they would go cannibalize other villages, and then that would lead to like, humans becoming cannibals because they have nothing else to eat. But in that same breath where he's explaining that, Doma also says that he was full of bullshit and he just told himself those things to do his job. But the story carries it forward as if Doma was correct and that he should have burned them, and then somehow Agni is still at fault for all the things that follow. But Doma's the one with the power. Doma burns Agni, and he knows his fires don't end until they burn everything that the thing touched. But Agni's like super regenerative, so he like fucking lives 10 years later. So like, deterministically, we know as the audience that Doma is the problem. Partially. Judah is also partially the problem. I mean, Doma does this thing specifically. Judah's the one who created the religious mentality that probably motivated Doma to do those things. So there's a kind of like broader, like macro environmental picture of like why the characters do the things, and a lot of the time it's like almost outside of their control because nobody asked to be born in these shitty situations. But Doma's still objectively 100% wrong, and Fire Punch is 100% right. I don't think Agni does anything wrong in the entire manga. If anything, he should have killed more people. Fuck him, honestly. There's just so many people in the manga that are just like, they don't deserve the lives they have because they're just so shit. So it's a little interesting in that. But there's this constant like incorrect myth that's born out of the things that happen. But the story carries it forward as if those incorrect myths are true, even though there are characters who like know they're not true. And like Agni knows things aren't true, but for some reason they just randomly have like memory leaks like in Higurashi, but it's like opposite, where instead of like they're getting memories from other worlds, they're like losing their memories. It's stupid. Like, you know, people like tell him, oh, you killed my family and you killed all this and all that, and like Agni, I mean, part of it makes a little sense because he's like constantly burning, so he like can't really argue against that. But even when that's happening, he's not even on fire, so like he should have been able to like, you know, I didn't do those things. Like, your dad set me on fire and I got kicked into the buildings. Like, I didn't intentionally kill all these people. The only people that Agni ever intentionally killed were people who were genuinely shit. But the problem with the manga is that it treats people who are rapist monsters and people who are normal people on like the same equal morality. Like, you owe the same respect to them. And I mean, that's not how society works. I get that feels like the framework that the author is coming from, and that feels like the framework a lot of like Japanese like morality stories seem to come from, at least in visual novels and fucking anime shit, where like you have super mega, I'm gonna rape everyone I see, I only care about raping and murder, and then you have nice businessman who goes to work and then goes to do some charity, and he's very generous and he's always helping people out, and he never has a negative thought. And like, you owe in Japanese land, I guess you owe the same respect to both of these people, it seems to be, because they treat it like there are characters like, oh, you killed this person, and it's like, dude, your dad's a fucking monster. Like, your dad literally burned down children and killed unremorsefully tons of people, and then fed himself a bunch of bullshit to justify it. And like, why do you get to have a good life? If anything, fuck you. Like, that should sting even more. And that's part of the stupidness of the morality, is that it's always this convenience cycle where like, if you kill this bad person, then all the people that care about them are gonna come out of the woodworks and be like, oh my god, you killed my baby, I'm gonna come kick your ass. And it's like, I don't know what the fuck's going on in Japan. I genuinely find it really fucking frustrating that this is like a constant like plot in a lot of like manga and visual novels and anime I see. I mean, I don't really watch that much anime, but it just seems so fucking stupid. Like, this guy is a fucking monster. I don't care if he's a father. It doesn't matter. You've betrayed that title by being a fucking pile of shit, because the title bestowed upon you of being a father, of being a dad, of these things implies that you have good qualities that extend beyond that role. And then if you're a father, but also like, I mean, it's the equivalent of saying like, oh, look at Stalin wrote letters to his sweetie. Oh, look, he's a human. Isn't that sad? Wow, I feel bad about, you know, this guy who like sent so many people to death, a boo boo boo, isn't that sad? It's like, no, it's actually really good. It's really good when we exercise people out of society who are literally just here to kill people. That's it. Because we should be focused primarily on maintaining those who don't want to kill people, and either helping change people who want to kill people, or just get rid of them. You know, like, what the fuck do we need to tolerate? You know, like if rapist man 45 tries to break into your house and he's gonna rape murder you, and he has all the tools to rape murder you, and he wants to rape murder you, why should I tolerate that? And why should a society tolerate being abused such? Because the harmful effects that person is going to inflict on that society will change the society for the worst and make it less functioning. So we have to guard ourselves from people that want to do us harm. But the problem is that in a lot of these stories, it puts rapist murder man on the same moral parity as normal everyday man. And I'm supposed to like feel that it's a moral wrong when you're killing people who are just literally rapist murder man. And it just doesn't work that way. Like, that's not how, I mean, maybe in Japan that's what they think. I don't know. Because maybe secretly all manga authors and like visual novel authors, they're all secretly like they want to be rapists. I mean, you kind of have to be a little fucked up to like have a story about like 12-year-old girls who are in like skimpy outfits rubbing their ass on glass. And yeah, I'm calling out fucking Ryokushio in Higurashi for that one dog shit anime back in 2006 where like Rika's like rubbing her ass on the glass. That's fucking disgusting. I mean, how do you have a story about child abuse and then you're gonna put those characters in sexualized situations for the sake of the audience's sexual gratification, and those I mean, well, not really Rika, but like Sadako at very least. Like, what the fuck? Like, why would you do that? Like, do you have brain cells? What the? It's very bizarre. I don't know. Anyway, Ryokushio or whatever the fuck his name is a fucking idiot. So, what about Fire Punch ending? I thought the ending was fine. It seemed a little forced. Like, there's no subtlety at all. Like, oh, I'm son now. I was raised as son. Like, there's just like a lot of exposition at the end. Like there's a character who shows up. He's like Iceman. He can make ice. And he shows up for like 2 fucking panels in 1 page. And this guy, 2 of the panels are just explaining his whole fucking backstory in 2 panels. And then he dies instantly. And it was just like, why even? Like, I didn't even need the exposition. I understood that he could control ice, and I could fill in the gaps myself. I don't need 2-paragraph text dumps in 2 boxes to explain that. Like, I don't know. It's very bizarre. It's very, very bizarre. And then that's another thing, too, is that it kind of treats Agni... Like, revenge is another aspect to it that is interesting, though. Because Agni gets revenge for things that are bad, but the revenge that he gets is always portrayed as having long-term negative consequences, which to me is like really fucking stupid. I mean, I know there's an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, okay? But that's the problem with having like a manga that seems to have or applying modern morality to a world that is not like our own. Like the story seems to condemn certain actions because of the outcomes that follow, and then like support certain actions because of the outcome that follows. Anytime Agni kills somebody, it's almost always leads to future conflict down the line. And when he doesn't do that, it usually is something that's like kind of positive. So the manga itself still has going for it modern conceptions of morality. But the problem is that the characters do not live in a modern society where you can fall back on that kind of morality to guide your actions. When you have a group of like, brothers and sisters trying to survive, and a group of guys are trying to come and get the sisters and tell them to like be slam pigs and then just like accept their role as women and let them rape them. Like, so you have innocents and you have actual rapists who have captured and raped one of your sisters. And it's treated as like almost a bad thing that Agni goes and kills them, because then future conflict follows. And I know conflict has to follow because the story isn't over. The conflict doesn't end until the story's over, because, there's a hack author who can't write a story without conflict. And you very much could do that. But conflict's quite interesting. But the conflict doesn't need to follow directly tied from those events. So, like, it's like, oh no, they killed the people over there and the whatever thing. I think they're the one people that where it's like not directly tied to that. But it's always that like, I do this bad action and then more bad actions follow. And it isn't until I like, even if I stop doing revenge things, then if I start doing good, the revenge will follow with me, because that happens to Agni. That happens to Doma. Doma stops being an asshole and raises a family. And then he's like, if you kill me, 17 children will die because they rely on me. And it's kind of funny, right? Because like Doma didn't give an absolute fuck at all about the village that Agni came from. And then he burned them all down. He didn't care at all. And it's like, but now I'm smarter, so therefore I deserve more moral respect. And I deserve to have my children survive because I'm more intelligent now and I can feel something. But the problem is how you feel about your crimes that you did after like 30 years doesn't really matter when the impact of that crime is still going on. The guy's still on fucking fire. Like, he literally has to live. He's lived like what, fucking 20 fucking years on fire at that point or some shit. And you're like, but I'm smarter now and I feel bad about it. And it's like, who cares, dude? You didn't give a fuck when you did it. And that's when it fucking mattered. And that's why you did it. Like, why should we tolerate you at all? Like, I don't know. I like revenge. I mean, obviously in the real world, you can't really do revenge because there are other systems in place for justice. And I think in a more idealized world, revenge isn't the go-to solution, because it obviously creates long-term, negative sentiments towards other individuals. But when you have this kind of world where it's like, try to survive and be peaceful or murder rapists, why are we even pretending that the murder rapists matter at all? Just kill them, Like, it's treated like this. Like, Fire Punch is giving over to his like worst features when he goes and kills all of them, and it's like this big regrettable thing. At least I think so in the manga. That's kind of how I interpreted it. I could be wrong, but that part to me was just fucking stupid as hell. And like, fuck Doma and fuck all his kids, But it's kind of funny though that like there is one huge heel turn. So it seems like the manga is going the route of like, oh my god, no, you can't kill rapists because, they have like a sister or something that they're not raping. But if it wasn't their sister, they'd definitely be raping them. So you can't kill them. And they're like, no, you can't do that. Come on. And then Fire Punch Man's just like, no, I'm going to be Fire Punch and I'm just going to go fucking murder these people. And fuck that shit. And that part was fucking awesome. But then at the end, it's like, 100 years later, and then like, it's very strange. I mean, the story, everyone says the story is nihilistic, and which isn't the case at all. Nihilism is a very rare form of philosophical ideology that people just attribute to anything that makes them feel sad. There is not a single character in this story who is nihilistic, short of Tagada. So what I mean by that is that a character who essentially doesn't care if they live or die and is just entirely almost carefree, but we find out that first understanding of Tagada as the nihilistic, edgy character who's just here to like have a good time and is just gonna, there's no right or wrong action for Tagada. He's just gonna do everything that he wants to do for his own pleasure, and if bad things happen, oh well. But we find out that that's actually a farce, and that's just a cope that Togata put on to handle the feelings that he has being a man in a woman's body and being alive for so long and not having any connection to the current world, but longing for a world that he just barely even got to see before it went to shit. So, like, a lot of people describe the manga as nihilistic, but it doesn't seem to be that at all, because every character has a very deep and powerful motivation or like drive to continue to do things, and they have purpose and they find purpose. It's the exact opposite of nihilism, because in nihilism you'd be like, oh, none of this shit matters, I'm just gonna go out and, like, you know, keep doing the same, I'm gonna go fucking hunt today, you know, if I freeze to death, whatever, like, I'm just a single person. Like, that's the true, like nihilism borders on this kind of like almost like karmic kind of like Buddhism, where it's like you don't matter any more than anybody else, so you're just going to go out and do the things that are pleasurable for you, and you're going to have as much respect for other people as it matters to you, but you're just going to live your life kind of defined by your own rules to a degree, not bordering on existentialism, where you're kind of redefining the rules for yourself. But like it isn't in so much as like being that nothing matters. Like, everything clearly matters, because everything that happens in the story is born out of things that happened previously, and all those things mattered so much to those people that they motivated them for like years and decades. So I find it hard to buy into the idea that the story is nihilistic. If anything, the story is very deterministic. Everything that happens is due to a prior consequence. Something happened before and it leads to something else. And we kind of see that at the end, where, like, you know, Agni kills Sun, and then he like has memory problems because he's regenerating for so long, or his brain got fucking destroyed, and then he was re-raised as reincarnated Sun, and then he can go meet up with Luna, even though it's not really Luna, he's not really Sun. But, like, that doesn't really matter, that she's not really Luna and he's not really Sun, because they believe that about themselves. That's who they introduce themselves as. And that's, like, the part of, like, the story that kind of, like, hits the nail on the head at the end. That, like, you have two characters who we know who they are. The girl is Judah, the guy is Agni. But they both think that they're Luna and Sun. They think they're two different people, that they aren't. And despite that, they come together, and their belief in believing that they are other people allows them to come together. And there's like, I don't know what the metaphor there is with, like, you know, the sun and the moon, like this, I don't know what that's about. I don't fucking care particularly, but that's like a kind of cute little like connection there. And then because of their belief that they are these people who we know that they aren't, allows them to find peace. They finally are able to find peace in their belief in something that we know isn't true. And there's a kind of beauty and solace in that belief is more important than truth, because that's what the whole story deals with that message. Because back to the mythologizing of like the main character, everything that he does is told in grains of truth. He's reported as being like a killer of Beamorg. Oh, but for a while he was reported as being the savior of Beamorg, because he brought out all the people who were, quote, firewood. And so it's what people believe that dictates what happens, and not really the facts. And that's one of the most interesting parts of Fire Punch, is that as the story goes on, the readers have more and more information to know who is who and to know the truth, but the characters are constantly, they don't know the past, because part of it is that they weren't there. Everything that's in the story is like handed down through like tales, basically, you know, like by the fireplace. So it makes sense why the stories would be incorrect for all the characters, but we as the audience know what really happened. And the manga references that like one time, I think, and there's a little bit of a confusion about, like, you know, I think near the end she didn't know he wasn't Sun to like know that he was somebody else, Luna anyway. when he came up there, because he's like, "Oh, I'm son," and because she like asked, and he says that, right, rather than like she just knows that, because she wasn't around when he became son, like he was reincarnated and lived like a 80-year life or some shit. So I think that's one of the other bigger themes that's like well executed, but I don't really know. I guess what they're saying, is that belief is what matters, and your belief matters more than the truth, because it's what people believes that motivates them to do things. And sometimes they do horrible things, and sometimes it's like said for the greater good. It's actually though interesting though is that the greater good, Judah's character does things for the greater good with that justification 2 times in the manga. In the beginning, she creates Beamorg, whatever the fuck city. I'm probably saying that wrong. And she's doing it for the greater good, and they enslave all these blessed with these different powers to basically make their society function. Some of them regenerate arms, so they're like eating people. Some of them provide electricity. Some of them are just on fire, so they use that to also create electricity. But they use all these blessed, and they're just like strapped to like gurneys, and then just like kept, like they're like force fed, and they get like 3 hours of sleep a night. So Judah was, created the society for the greater good of these other people that the society could support. So you can kind of see that inversion there. There's like, a couple hundred blessed who are maintaining the society for probably, 10 to 20,000 people or some shit. And then at the end, Judah makes a sacrifice for the greater good, and she sacrifices herself rather than sacrificing others. And she allows this new, society to take hold. I mean, ultimately, I guess nuclear arms cause them all to blow each other up or something, or in any way, like a rock blows everything up. So, who cares? But, obviously it matters at the time because there were people there, whatever. But that's an interesting thing. And I guess maybe that's, the final message, maybe, is that sacrifice for the greater good is only morally correct when you're the one who's making the sacrifice and you're choosing to do so. And you're choosing to do it for somebody else, not yourself. Because earlier, Judah was, basically choosing the blessed to have them sacrifice themselves for the society that she was making. And then at the end, she sacrifices herself for everybody else. So that seems to be the big final message. I don't have really any other thoughts on the story other than a lot of the shit talking I saw about this manga seems to really just be from triggered conservative retards. Sorry for using the R word. Whoopsie. Because everybody on 4chan, from what I see now, they just shit post that it's a tranny manga is what they call it, because one of the characters is trans. But I don't even think Tagada's transness was pretty unique, because he could reform. He was a regenerative blessed. But the manga calls into question a little bit of could he have regenerated in a different body? But then right before the end, Tagada basically confirms that he can't get surgery because his body regenerates as female no matter what. But it seemed in the beginning they were putting these hints out there that maybe Tagada had lived so long, because memories are a big issue in the story, that maybe because Tagada had lived so long that his memories weren't correct, and maybe he was a guy, maybe he just remembered being a female and that's why his body came back as a female. That's what I thought was going to happen. Obviously they kind of they eventually just explicitly say what the story is, but I thought they were setting up a little bit differently. So that's why, despite the explicit nature of Tagada wanting to be male, I think there's a little breathing room before that scene where it's is Tagada really male? Is Tagada really female? Personally, I don't care either way. I thought they were a pretty cool trans character, and it's pretty cool to see characters like that in stories. And also shown with a degree of respect, because Tagada is starts off a little rough around the edges to kind of care about, but then becomes like one of like the top characters for me anyway. I like Tagada a lot. So that part was a little interesting just because it seemed like they were going one direction, and then they just kind of tell you like, yes, I'm trans, I'm a man, but I'm in a woman's body and I'm miserable. And the things I say and do are just a front for me to cope with how fucking miserable I am. And that's it. And they just say that. But that didn't seem to be the pieces that they were laying for the groundwork of that character. So I thought I was a little disappointed. I'm glad they were explicit about it though, so that it kind of forces readers to like, you have to address it. You have to understand it. Like you have to accept what's happening. You can't just be like, oh, I don't really think they're trans. Like they explicitly said it, you know, like, cause like there's so many times where there's like characters who are like borderline trans in like some kind of like show or some shit. And then be like, I didn't really think that character was trans. I just thought that they were this or that or whatever. And it's like, oh God, man, just like I really hate that anti-intellectual shit where it's like, oh, I didn't really think it was about this or that, or I didn't think at all. I just thought it was this, you know. I don't know. It's just like, what's the point in fucking living? What's the point in consuming art if you're not gonna have any fucking novel ideas about what the fuck you're watching? Anyway, that's the end of my rant. Fire Punch. 7 or 8 out of 10. I don't fucking know. It's not for anybody. I wouldn't even say it's not for everybody. It's not for anybody. But if you want to fucking get memed on, it's great manga to read. I gotta sneeze.